Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shvasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam karoti vachanam pangam langyate girim Yat kripatamam vande Shri Guru Dina Taranam Paramanandam Madhavam Namam Vishwadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamita Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunvadi Pachachadi Shatarane. Thank you so much once again for joining. So we had, I believe, 2 sessions that were left over from our previous. So we'll complete that and then we will move on to our Q&A part.
Yeah, so I think it was group 2 and group 1, which should be pending because we were going in the reverse order. So if group 2 is ready, can you please start your presentation? And also just a note, I sent a message also. If we can be conscious of the time and please wrap up in 5 minutes, that will be really helpful.
Okay. Hare Krishna. So for group 2, we had described 4 types of people who do not take to Krishna consciousness. The following skit is a conversation between a devotee and an aspiring devotee. Aspiring devotee, Hare Krishna, I recently started reading the Bhagavad Gita inspired by my time with the devotees at the temple. It's been an amazing journey so far. I'm currently on chapter 7 and have a few questions. Do you have some time to discuss them?
Hare Krishna, yes, I would be glad to discuss.
Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 talks about people who do not take to the path of bhakti. Can you please clarify who these are?
There are 4 types of people who do not take to Krishna consciousness or Krishna bhakti. They are Mudas, Naradhamas, Maya Partha Jnana, and Asuri Bhavam Asrita. Let me explain to each category in detail. Mudas are foolish people who work tirelessly to enjoy the fruits of their labor, but have no time for spiritual pursuits. They are so absorbed in working that they can't even fully enjoy the limited rewards they earn. Driven by material desires, they remain unaware of why they toil so hard merely to satisfy basic bodily needs like eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Naradhamas are considered the lowest of mankind. Among 8.4 million species, 400,000 are human, and Naradhamas are those who are regulated social and political lives but lack spiritual or religious depth. Even if they practice religion, they miss its essence, knowing God and developing a loving relationship with Him. While a baby in the womb prays to Krishna to engage in bhakti after birth, once born, the child forgets the pain of pregnancy and becomes distracted by the material illusions. Though materially advanced, Naradhamas willfully neglect the primary duty of human life to embrace Krishna consciousness. Now, the third one is Maya Partha Jnana, and they are those whose knowledge is stolen by material illusion. They belong to a learned class, including philosophers, poets, and scientists, but are misguided by the illusory energy Maya and therefore disobey Krishna, the Supreme Lord. Even if they are well versed in Gita, they misinterpret its teaching despite knowing that Krishna is the source of everything. These individuals lack the desire to practice Krishna bhakti and do not encourage others to do so either. And the fourth one is Asuri Bhavam Asrita. Now these are those of demoniac nature, openly atheistic class, and holding their own concocted reasons for rejecting the Supreme Lord. Some believe that the Lord can never manifest in the material world. while others view the Lord as impersonal. These individuals are envious of Krishna and believe in false incarnation of the Supreme, yet refuse to submit to the real Supreme Lord. Their entire lives are devoted to decrying the personality of Godhead, making it impossible for them to surrender to the lotus feet of Krishna. Are you clear now on the four types of people who do not take to the Krishna consciousness?
Yes, I'm clear now, but I have one last question. Since these classes of people will never take to Krishna consciousness, is there no hope for them?
Great questions. These individuals typically do not embrace Krishna consciousness on their own. However, through the unconditional mercy of a pure devotee of the Lord, they can be engaged in Krishna conscious activities, knowingly or unknowingly. Over time, they may develop a taste for these practices and eventually take up to Krishna consciousness. While this transformation may take many lifetimes, Krishna and his devotees are exceptionally kind and will not deny them the opportunity to return home back to Godhead.
Thank you for the clarification. It all makes sense to me now.
Hare Krishna. Please keep reading Bhagavad Gita and seek the association of other devotees. Also constantly remember Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Bol.
Oops. Oh.
Thank you, Prabhu. Very succinct and still comprehensive. Good job. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, next group.
Group 1. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, devotees. Please accept my respect, humble obeisances, all Goddess Maharaj and Sid Bapal. Hope you can see my screen.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah, thank you, Hare Krishna. So, today's topic or the presentation is about saying yes but no to Krishna, and it's God worship. Bhagavad Gita, chapter number 7, verses 20 to 27. So, it's role play. We are going to introduce about ourselves. So, two friends met after several years on Krishna Janmashtami Day, and in the following week they have a discussion about demigod worship. So it'll be played by two characters. One is Varun and one is Shyam. Kaushik Prabhu, are you there?
Yes, Prabhuji, I'm here. So, Varun, a devoted worshipper of demigods, still deeply connected to his traditional practices, and Shyam is a former demigod worshipper who has transitioned to Krishna consciousness and worships Krishna exclusively.
Shyam, I have noticed that you have shifted your focus entirely to Krishna lately. Were not you once devoted to the demigods like me? What changed?
Yes, Varun. I was once deeply devoted to the demigods, but as I delved deeper into the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, especially chapter 7, I realized that while demigod worship has its place, pure devotion to Krishna offers something far greater.
But why abandon the demigods? They have always granted my desires, health, wealth, and success. They are easier to approach and quick to respond. Isn't that what we need in life?
It's true, Varun. Demigods are indeed powerful and they can grant material benefits quickly. But Krishna explains in verse 20 that those who worship demigods are often driven by material desires, their intelligence clouded, Hritagyana. They seek temporary gains, not realizing that these are fleeting.
But if Krishna is the supreme, why does he allow us to worship demigods? isn't he the one? Isn't he the one who is supposed to be worshipped?
Krishna respects our free will. In verse 21, he says that he strengthens the faith of those who worship the demigods, allowing them to pursue their desires. However, it's Krishna who ultimately grants the results. The demigods, though powerful, are only channels through which Krishna operates.
So even when I worship the demigods, it's actually Krishna who is reciprocating.
Exactly. In verse 22, Krishna clarifies that the result of all worship, including demigod worship, came from him. But here's the key difference. Demigod worship yields temporary material results, while worship of Krishna leads to eternal fulfillment.
What about those who think God is formless? I have heard that many believe Krishna's form is just temporary, like the demigods' forms.
Krishna addresses this in verse 24, saying that those without sufficient intelligence, abhuddhaya, think he was formless before and has now assumed a form. They don't understand that Krishna's form is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. This misunderstanding keeps them from experiencing the personal relationship that bhakti offers.
And what about us? Is Krishna hiding from us too?
In verse 25, Krishna says he is not visible to those who are deluded by the material energy, but he is always present in his deity form, in his holy name, and his devotees. The challenge lies in our material attachments and misconceptions. When we clear these from our hearts, Krishna reveals himself fully.
I see. It's not that Krishna is hidden, it's that we are blinded by our desires and misunderstandings. Thank you, Shyam. I now understand the importance of directing my devotion to Krishna. I don't want to be stuck in the cycle of temporary gains anymore. I want to experience the eternal joy of serving Krishna.
I'm glad you have come to this realization, Varun. Pure bhakti is the highest path, and Krishna is eager to reciprocate and with those who sincerely seek him. Let's continue on this journey together, focusing our hearts and minds on Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Very good. So completed right on time and covered all the salient points. Excellent job. Thank you. So, yeah, Prabhuji, if you can stop sharing your screen. Navin Krishna Prabhu. We can.
Yes, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So we can take the remaining time for any question answers that you may have on chapter 8, one of the more interesting and a little foreboding chapter also, mostly talks about death. And then towards the end, we will set up for our next class. Okay. So if you don't have any questions, then maybe we can, so at least let's set up for the next class, and I can start a little bit of an overview on the eighth chapter. Okay, so so let me pause once again, final call, see if there are any
Prabhuji,
questions.
can I ask a question on chapter 7, the presentation that was just given? Hare Krishna.
On the chapter 7 presentation, yeah, of course.
Yeah, just trying to figure out like it says like we should like if we worship demigods, then we are looking for materialistic interest or something, and then like our focus and mind should be more on concentrating on towards Krishna. So I sometimes get confused on the practical aspect of it in terms of like we just see the like there were Ganapati Puja, right, was going on for so many days, and I saw so many devotees even participating in those. So I'm like failing as an individual to understand, is that something we should be participating in terms of like just being where it's no harm of worshipping a demigod, but not maybe asking something in return. Is that how our mood should be when we are participating in these festivals? What is your like, what would you suggest, or what is there in the scripture in terms of how we should be like?
So the 7th chapter actually is quite helpful in that context that so Krishna says that one who worships the demigods goes to the planets of the demigods. Krishna also kind of criticizes them, says that they're alpamedeshu, they're men of small intelligence. Later on in the next chapter, he will also say that how everything from Brahmalok to Patal Lok, which obviously includes all the demigod planets, are essentially Dukhali Masashrata. They're essentially places of misery and impermanence. So with that conception, philosophically, worship of the demigod is something that is that Krishna is not recommending and not the best use of one's efforts and time. Now, what happens, and this is more of a social question, what happens if you're living in a society and there's Ganesh Puja being done or Durga Puja being done? There are a couple of ways that devotees address this. One is that if they're sufficiently firm in their Krishna consciousness, they also approach the devas with the same mood of helping them make spiritual advancements. So, for example, in Braja, we see the gopis observing the Katyani Vrata. Katyani is a form of Durga Devi. So they're observing a fast for Durga Devi, and they're asking that please give us Krishna as her husband. Right. So because the demigods are also devotees, much more exalted than us. So just like when we are in the association of other devotees, especially ones who are more senior, we ask for their blessings, we ask for their compassion that we can make advancement. And then we can also approach the devas in the same mood, that you're an advanced Vaishnava, please help us make spiritual advancement. The second is the internal and external mood, that if one is not in a position to be able to make the distinction, then one can participate externally for social norms, but the internal mood is still that of detachment, understanding the position of the demigods. Once I was doing yatra in Vrindavan with Prabhupada disciples, senior devotee, and And I think his mood was very sweet, because in Vrindavan, many of the temples you go, you will see that there are deities of Lord Shiva, Durga Devi. There's a very famous Durga Devi temple there. And then he would recite different verses that glorify these demigods in conjunction with Krishna. Like in Brahma Samhita, Lord Shiva is glorified as, Kshiram yathadadi vikara vishesha yogan sanjayate nai tatha pratagasti hetu yah shambhutam api tatha samupeti karya namadi purushottamam bhaja. Right? So Lord Shiva is glorified as being almost non-different from Krishna, but still some difference, that Krishna is independent and he's dependent. Right? So that way we are doing both. We are establishing the demigods in the right position with respect to Krishna. As senior, considering them as senior Vaishnavas, we are glorifying them, but in the mood of Vaishnavas, not in the mood of order suppliers.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Padmani Radha?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhu, I had a question about in chapter 8, where there are verses about, end of life and how, what it takes to remember Krishna when you are leaving the body, material body. So I think my question is it the right understanding, Prabhu, that whatever endeavor I can definitely talk for myself. Whatever little endeavor I am putting right now as a practicing devotee, that is going to enable me to remember Krishna when my end of life comes.
That is absolutely correct. And I will cover a little bit more about it when we do the chapter 8 overview. But your understanding is absolutely correct.
Yeah, because I think I am at loss of words when, sometimes, especially in Indian setup and Indian households, sometimes the elders, I don't know where that understanding comes from, where you get advice from elder people saying, "Abhi kyun kar rahe ho bhakti? Bhakti to 60 saal ke baad hone ke baad, you should do all these then." So I guess just as part of culture, we don't really even if you know a little bit, we don't out of respect, we don't argue in that situation. But when you're given an advice like this, Prabhu, especially coming from well-meaning elders who are not following Krishna consciousness, how do you deal and answer those kind of suggestions that are thrown at you?
Thank you. So in general, in all preaching situations, the response is largely predicated on the nature of the relationship. In some cases, if the relationship allows for it, one can preach based on knowledge. One can preach out of compassion. In the final reckoning, when one is in this situation, the question that one should ask is that what can I do to increase the person's Krishna consciousness? In some cases, it is speaking. In some cases, it is not speaking. Right? Because sometimes, and this is more so in family situation, more so with elders, that, and I have personal experience of this, that if you speak to them strongly, they become averse to you. So you're causing them to commit Vaishnava Aparadh, and they become averse to Krishna. So where they were in a neutral position earlier on, because transitively they feel that you're representing Krishna and you're criticizing them, their displeasure moves over to Krishna also. Right? So the end goal is that you're turning them away from Krishna. So preaching is rarely winning an argument or debating. So I know here we have mock arguments and debates, and that's here because both the sides are friendly. But in real life, preaching is really about about proving that you're right and the other person is wrong. Preaching is just trying to answer this question: that what's the best way to increase the other person Krishna consciousness. Sometimes people would come and criticize Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada would sit and listen to them and answer and give them gulab jamuns. That was the only thing. That was his response. He would give them prasadam. And sometimes he would also debate with them. And so he could discern when one is open to hearing and when one is simply wanting to pontificate, right? So I remember, I think Bhurijan Prabhu makes this point that when a conversation starts generating more heat than light, then it's time to stop it. Right? So when it is generating more anger and less illumination, then it's time to stop it. So sometimes people say you're too old you're too young to start Krishna consciousness, and wait till you're old. Either you can say I'm practicing so that I can do it when I'm old, or you can say, yes, you're right, I will take it less, I'll take a little bit, and maybe you can do a little bit. So whatever the relationship, the strength of the relationship allows you to, whatever latitude it offers you, you can avail of that.
Thank you, Prabhu. I think I also had a parallel question from my own personal life, from my father's life, personally. So he was an atheistic person. But when he was leaving his body, I was there, and he was able to listen to, Bhagavad Gita chapter 2. There was constant kirtan playing around him. So how do I understand that? Because I have never seen him do any endeavor to remember Krishna when he is leaving his body, but he still got it. So how do I understand that?
So these things are mystical because you're seeing a very small fraction of a jiva's existence, right? You do not know what all activities were done in previous lives. And the second is Krishna's benediction to devotees, that and different Puranas say different thing. That when a person takes to devotional service, 7 generations on all sides get liberated. So be that may be as it is, but definitely we see that many times that parents of devotees, in many cases, they were actually very much against. Right. So I met your father. I know that he was not favorable, but he was also not disrespectful. He was, he was always maintaining a very respectful demeanor. But I know of also devotees whose parents were completely against it. But because of the influence of the devotees, because of Krishna's mercy, they were able to hear kirtan. They were able to. Some of them actually had a change of heart. One Western devotee, he was sharing with me that his father was initially used to be. He had almost kind of excommunicated him from his family, but over time he became more open. He was talking to him, but still very much averse to Krishna consciousness. But towards the last few months, when he realized that end was inevitable, he became very philosophical. He said, tell me more about Krishna, read to me about Bhagavad Gita. And then towards the very end, like the last few days, he kept sharing with us, and he was delirious at the time, but he kept saying this, that, I'm getting tired with this body and getting this body again and again. I just want to end the cycle, right? So very deep realization from a person who was fairly openly averse. So that's Krishna's blessing, that when a person takes to devotional service, then Krishna blesses the entire family. That's the children, the parents, uh, the relatives, the friends. That's Krishna's blessings.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you, Mataji. Good question. Shri Padma?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I was just thinking, Divya Mataji's question. It always comes to my mind, one of my favorite quotes when the Krishna states in 1866, abundant all varieties of religion, and just surrender unto me. I'll deliver you. So for me, I think all varieties of religion is even demigod worship that, before a lot of us came to Krishna consciousness, even includes that. And also if we want spiritual blessings as Bhakti yoga practitioners, or trying to be Bhakti yoga practitioners on this journey, we have the acharyas, that we can ask for spiritual. But I find a lot of senior devotees I've seen that they celebrate Navratri, and everything they celebrate to pray to the deity and ask if they're sick, or whatever it is. But that quote always comes to my mind, and I always think, why even if we want spiritual, the demigods cannot give anything without Krishna's sanction, and then the acharyas are so so high. So if we want spiritual, we can just ask the acharyas for blessings. That's
Very good point.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Excellent discussion. So let me share my screen, and we will go through an overview of chapter 8. Okay, so the title of the chapter is Attaining the Supreme. So as you know, we are now in the second section of the Bhagavad Gita, and the focus of that chapter 7 to 12 is Bhakti. In the 7th chapter, which we just finished discussing, the focus was in terms of understanding Krishna and the mentality of those who do and do not understand Krishna. Chapter 8 is Attaining the Supreme. Chapter 9 is the most confidential knowledge. 10 is the opulence of the absolute. 11 is a universal form. And 12 is devotional service. Right? So all these chapters are packed with Bhakti, and it culminates in our 12th chapter that talks about pure devotional service. Okay, so let's start with chapter 8, summation. So in chapter 7, we saw that Krishna is giving Arjuna information about himself, and in this 8th chapter, Krishna will explain the process of attaining. And because if I tell you that there is a pot of gold and I glorify the pot of gold, it's not going to be of much use unless I tell you how to get to that pot of gold. Right? So that's the focus of really the remaining chapters. So broadly speaking, it's divided into two parts: attaining Krishna and the destination of those who do and those who do not attain Krishna. So the chapter begins with a set of 7 questions that Arjun will ask Krishna. And these questions are essentially a repetition of the last 2 verses of the 7th chapter, where Krishna says that I am Brahman, I am Adhyatma. And he kind of seeds the question. So he leaves those 2 verses there. And the 8th chapter begins with Arjun saying, doesn't actually say, you said that, but based on the last 2 verses, he says, can you explain to me these 7 concepts? So the question that Arjun will ask is, who is Brahman? Right? And one thing we'll notice is that the answers that Krishna gives are not always congruent to the question. Like, so Krishna gives the answer that is best suited for Arjun. And so this is essentially preaching technique, right? So if a person asks you a question, instead of answering the question based on knowledge, you answer the question based on intent, right? And what exactly is the person trying to know and what will benefit the person most. So Krishna applies that logic. So when Arjuna asks the question, who is Brahman, then the Brahman, as you know, could either be Krishna or the Jiva. But in the answer, Krishna will say that Jiva is the Brahman. Then what is Adhyatma? Right? So whenever you see the word Adi, so Adi means controller. And Adhyatma means who is the controller of the Atma. Atma in this case refers to the body. And Krishna will answer saying that it is one's swabhav or one's intrinsic nature that is actually the controller of the body. Right? It's not the Jiva, not Krishna, but essentially the swabhav. And what is the swabhav composed of? The 3 modes of material nature. So what Krishna is saying is that for the conditioned soul, the controller of the body is the modes of material nature. And these modes are held in the subtle body. And they carry on with the Jiva birth after birth. Third question that he will ask is, what is karma? Right? Now, again, Krishna gives an interesting answer. The intuitive answer is karma is activities that are done, right? But Krishna answers saying that those activities that result in the creation of a material body is called karma. Right? So you see the direction that Krishna is taking Arjuna in. Because if one is doing devotional service, externally it looks like karma. In fact, Prabhupada would say the devotees are actually doing more ugra karma, apparently. They're running since morning to night, sometimes cooking, sometimes distributing books, managing temple, but they do not result in another birth. So Krishna here is laying the seeds of bhakti, that only those activities that result in one of the 8.4 million species of material life is called karma. Okay. Then Adi Bhuta. So Adi is ruler and Bhuta is living entity. So what rules the living entities? Right? And the answer that Krishna gives is that for the conditioned soul, it is matter. It is the matter like the pots and the pans, the temporary articles, the human body, They have the characteristic that they are always changing. So that is Adibhuta. Then who is Adi Deva? Right? So Adi Deva means that who controls the Devas? Is it another Deva, or is it Brahman? And Krishna will answer that Adi Deva refers to the universal form of Krishna. So this is the form that Krishna will show in the 11th chapter, where Arjuna will witness that the form includes all the demigods, beginning from Lord Brahma. The 6th question is, what is Adi Yagya? Who is ultimately worshipped by the sacrifices? And Krishna says that it is he who is the ultimate benefactor of all sacrifices. So he is the one who inspires the jiva to perform sacrifices as the indwelling Paramatma. And he is also the benefactor of the sacrifices. So Krishna uses the word eva to also indicate the non-difference of the Paramatma from his two-handed form. So that is 6 questions. And the 7th question will be that how to remember Krishna at the time of death. So if you see this division of the questions, the first 3 questions refer to Jiva. The next 3 questions refers to Krishna. Adibhut, Adidev, and Adiyagya, they are all Krishna. And the first 3 questions are Jiva. And the 7th question talks about how can the Jiva described by the first 3 attributes attain the Lord described by the next 3 attributes. And that essentially is the bulk of the discussion in the 8th chapter. So, as you're aware, that we exist at 3 levels. So there is the gross material body, which is more made of the Pancha, Mahabhuta, earth, water, fire, air, ether. There is the subtle body made of mind, intelligence, and ego. And then there is the spiritual soul. There, accompanying the spiritual soul is the expansion of Krishna as Paramatma. Now, when a jiva utilizes all this to perform fruitive activities, he essentially enters into the cycle of birth and death, which means that the jiva uses his free will, he uses the sanction of the Paramatma, he uses his mind and intelligence and ego directed towards the performance of fruitive activities. Then essentially he is trapped in this cycle of transmigration. Or out of the free will, the jiva can choose Krishna. So everything remains the same. The body, the Paramatma, the subtle body, the jiva. The only thing that changes is the free will of how the jiva is deploying his free will. And the destination is completely different. So, in the 8th chapter, we will also see a description of the process of transmigration, right? So, like I said, the 8th chapter is mostly about dying. So we see what happens at the time of death. So one thing that happens is that the soul leaves the gross body. Right? So the soul that has been living in the gross body for however many years now departs from the gross body along with the subtle body. So the subtle body accompanies the soul as it leaves the material body. Under the supervision of the Paramatma. So what does the Paramatma do? The Paramatma looks at the activities that have been done by the jiva, the karma, and looks at the desires of the jiva. So a jiva may have done a lot of sinful activities, but has a desire to acquire the body of a demigod. The Paramatma will not sanction it, because while they desire, they do not deserve. But on the other hand, a jiva may have done a lot of pious activities, but for whatever reason, desires a body of a Rakshasa or an Asura, then the desires and the deserves line up and the jiva gets that body. So ultimately, under the supervision of the Paramatma, the soul's desires and deserves are lined up. And the desire is coming out of the free will of the jiva, and the deserves is coming out of the past activities performed by the jiva. And the jiva now gets another body there, right? So the process of transmigration was introduced by Krishna in the second chapter, right? When he talked about the nature of the soul, he talked about also how the soul was samsi janani yatha vihaya, that how giving up one garment and taking on another. Here there is a little bit of a deeper description of the mechanism of transmigration. Right? And for the devotees, the destination is Krishna. So, given the fact that the desires of the jiva at the time of death determines the destination, along with other factors, the deserves and the sanction of the super soul, etc. But the desires manifest as the consciousness at the time of death. So what determines this consciousness? So the activities that have been performed by the jiva throughout their life is being stored in the subtle body. So sometimes people say that, what if I live a sinful life and think of Krishna at the time of death? Or what if I lead a sinful life and think of Indra at the time of death? Will I become Indra? Will I get Krishna's planet? The answer is that at the time of death, one thinks according to what one has been thinking during their lifetime. So you can do an experiment and see that if you startle a devotee, if you scare a devotee, they'll spontaneously say something like, "Oh Krishna," or "Narsingadev." And if you go walk outside and startle somebody on the street, then reflexively there will be some kind of a cuss word that will come out. The difference is the nature of activities that will be performed. So death is a startling experience. It's a bewildering experience. So it's not possible for one to step back and say that now let me do this. So the conditioning that has been built throughout the life, and indeed previous lifetimes, that automatically begins to play out, and that determines the consciousness of the person. So in this way, these two factors, the desires and the deserves, the karma and the free will of the jiva, they act to determine the consciousness of the jiva at the time of the death. And based on that, gets a next body. So just a summation on how reincarnation works. So there is the consciousness at the time of death, which will actually determine the next body. So the reason Krishna is speaking about is that think about me, and you will get a body like me, essentially meaning that you will get a spiritual body, right? This is the essence of the 8th chapter, right? So Krishna first makes the point that what happens to you at the time of death is determined by your consciousness. Right? So best is for you to be Krishna conscious. And that way you will go back to Krishna. So how to prepare for this, for getting the right consciousness at the time of death? So there are the yogis who practice for years and years to control their mind, right? And they are not bewildered by death. In fact, they're able to summon death by choice. And the purpose of Ashtanga Yoga is essentially this, that they're able to fix their consciousness as they desire at the time of death. And the yogis can think of anything they want. They can think of Krishna, Lord Kapila makes this point in the 3rd canto. But because of the nature of the practice of Ashtanga Yoga, the yogis typically think of either the impersonal Brahman or maybe the Paramatma form. And for those who have had the association of devotees or are practicing devotees, they think of Krishna. Right? So this is how one way of preparing that you. So we see that in the Bhagavatam, those devotees who appeared in Satyuga, because at that time the mood of worship was essentially Ashtanga Yoga. So they did perform long meditation, but essentially their focus was Krishna. Dhruv Maharaj, not long, but he did for 6 months, and he was performing severe austerities, but meditating on Krishna. Right? That's how they prepare their consciousness. For the devotees, the way to develop this consciousness is by the study of scriptures, by associating with devotees, by chanting the holy name, by living in a holy place and worshipping the deities. Now, these things are not, these points I'm making are mostly based on Prabhupada's purports, but not so much on the verses, because Prabhupada takes this opportunity to also instruct us in terms of how to prepare us for death. So later on, when we do the Nectar of Devotion, then these 5 things are considered to be the most potent aspect of bhakti that helps prepare one's consciousness at the time of death. Study of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Vaishnav Sangha. Essentially, association means Vaishnav Seva. Then chanting of the holy name, living in a holy dham, or if you cannot live in a holy dham, then make your house a holy dham, and worship deities. Right, and that will develop this mood of constant remembrance of Krishna's Nam, Roop, Gun, and Leelas. Right, from the scriptures we study the Leelas. By chanting we worship the names, and in deity worship the Roop. And in association of devotees, we discuss the other attributes of Krishna. So why does Krishna speak about death? Because it's the time for change. And the new body is based on the consciousness at the time of death. Now, the consciousness at the time of death is involuntary, a result of how the life was spent. The yogis can spend lives of many lifetimes in an attempt to control this consciousness, but the devotees live their life in a way that the consciousness by itself goes to Krishna. This is a point Srila Prabhupada would always make, that the mark of a devotee is that just like a child reflexively goes to the mother, and especially if there is danger. You see small children, they may be doing mischief and playing around, but as soon as they feel threatened, they run to their mother. They don't see anything else. So the devotees train their minds in this way, that as soon as there is anything that impacts them, the mind automatically rushes to the lotus feet of Krishna. Yeah? And of course, Krishna reciprocates. And the destination is, Krishna says that, Krishna describes the spiritual world in this chapter, that it is eternal, there is no birth, death, disease, and old age. There is no envy, anger, or hatred, full of bliss, no fall down. Right? Material world is Shashvatam. In the spiritual world, there is no fall down, and it is only attained by unalloyed devotion. Right. So, quick summary: that Krishna speaks about himself as the ultimate goal. Now he speaks about the process to reach him. The consciousness of the person at the time of death determines the next body. Material consciousness will result in a material body. And Krishna consciousness will take one back to the spiritual world. One can become a yogi to fix consciousness through samadhi, but the easy way is to become a devotee. Okay. So I'll stop over here. Not sure how am I doing with time, but okay. I guess we have a couple of minutes there, so I'll hand it over to Rup Raghunath Prabhu for the next class setup.
Yeah, sure, Prabhuji. First of all, thank you very much for a nice overview. As always, these presentations really make it very easy for us to understand. Regarding next week, I think we will do the group presentations. I will post the agenda in our chat group. And there are also 5 lectures on this chapter that are available on the website, pre-recorded classes. So if devotees have more questions, and if time permits, we can also cover the Q&A that will finish chapter 8 for module 2.
Thank you, Prabhu. So thank you very much. We'll end over here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa
Thank you,
sindhubheva
Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha.
Anant Koti Vaishnavind ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Jai Gaur Premanande.
Hari Hari.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.